Hello and welcome to the YouTube version of Surf Splendor. If you've listened to the audio episode of today's show, you know that it's brought to you by NVS Fins, because I told you that if you come to YouTube, you can actually see the fins for yourself. So we talk about them occasionally on the podcast and say that the reason why NVS is a superior fin is because of this G10 material. It's a fiberglass that's laminated in an autoclave. And what that does is it allows NVS to compress all of the material into a much more kind of condensed package, yielding kind of a stronger, more rigid fin where you want it to be rigid, essentially at the base, but still have the flexibility in the parts that you want it to be flexible because it yields such a thin package. It also allows them to have a really kind of sharper, more refined edge on the front and the back, which creates less drag. So traditional layups, they just yield more bulk, or certainly the molded plastic version of a fin does as well. That's going to be kind of your lowest quality structure, but this G10 allows all of the benefits of strength and rigidity, flexibility in the exact right places, and of course just less mass. So I've talked about the G10 material. We've also talked about these C-drive fins, which are really incredible. The design is kind of heralded by everybody, but the material is what allows NVS to produce the fin that has this wide of a base, kind of like a keel fin, but then a huge cutaway with the thin edges, the flexible tip, so you get all of the speed out of the base of the wave, but all of the maneuverability because you have so much of the surface area cut away. So check these out. These are available in twins and thrusters as well. These are the C drives made out of the same G10 material. And then the other thing that I've talked about on the podcast is that they offer custom programs for if you're a surfboard shaper and you want to build a custom fin for a specific board model, or just a surfer who wants a one-off set, maybe a design that you've been thinking about that isn't available on the marketplace. Cubicle Surf up in Oregon, who designs surfboards for river waves, heard about NVS on our podcast, reached out to them. They've been designing this hatchet style fin and needed somebody to manufacture it. So they got NVS to make it out of the G10 material. So super high quality, strong, rigid fin. These are the upright twin hatchets. They also do a smaller hatchet and tri-fins and a quad set as well. So Cubicle heard about it here, had NVS manufacture the fins, and then reached out to let me know about the process and how stoked they were, and they ended up sending me a set of these twin upright hatchets. So full circle moment, super cool. surfnvs.com is their website. Use our promo code, which is the word podcast, and you could save 20% off any of the Apex series. And the Apex series is really what you want because this is the fin that they use the G10 material in. So surfnvs.com, promo code podcast to save 20%. All right, without further ado, enjoy today's show.
I began emailing with Sterling Spencer in 2017. He had moved back to his hometown of Pensacola, Florida 2 years prior, and I was curious about his recent film projects and why he hadn't updated his surf satire YouTube series, Pinch My Salt. I was planning a trip to Florida, but through our email exchanges, we figured out that we'd actually be 9 hours apart despite being in the same state. Sterling was born and raised on the Gulf Coast, and although it's not really known for its surf, his father, Yancey Spencer III, enjoyed a flourishing surf career from Pensacola, and he was actually known as the godfather of Gulf Coast surfing. In 1970, California board builder Greg Knoll introduced a Yancey Spencer signature model, and in 1972, Yancey opened Interlight Surf Shop in Gulf Breeze, Florida, and then eventually a second in Pensacola and a third in Fort Walton in 1981. And now, nearly 50 years later, they have 5 shops in total throughout Florida. In 1988, Yancey fathered today's guest. Sterling Spencer began surfing as a toddler and was signed to Billabong by the age of 8. After 11 years of traveling the world with his sights set on competitive pro surfing success, Sterling found what would become his most comfortable role in surfing. A surf satirist lampooning the limelight pros that the magazines treated as demigods. Sterling had full access to the inner workings of the surf biz, and what he may have lacked in drive and discipline to graduate from the QS to the CT, he more than made up for in comedic prowess and a wry sense to never take surfing too seriously. His blog was pinchmysalt.tv, and he leveraged the burgeoning YouTube platform, which was only 3 years old at the time, to create, publish, and connect with an audience instantly. Arguably, he was the first professional surfer to truly harness the power of the internet to build a career. Pinch My Salt created content for about 5 years, 3 of those being reliably hilarious. Throughout that time and in the years since, Sterling has made a series of films. They always embodied the same comedic sensibility of Pinch My Salt, but they allowed for a much more intentional and well-designed aesthetic. Art directed from the chosen title and font to camera movements, wardrobe, and even hiring professional actors. His film Gold included Bob Saget in the role of his overbearing shaper who is chastising him for being...
You're not even a pro surfer. What tour are you even on?
I'm on the surfing tour.
The surfing tour.
I'm pro surfing. Pro surfering.
If anything, you're a B-grade pro surfer that wears glasses to be different and makes silly little videos. I would never do something like that. John doesn't even follow you on Instagram, man.
While other surf films have dabbled in amateur skits and comedy, Sterling's films defined the genre while never undermining his legitimate surfing talent. These feature films allowed Sterling to command the space that he had long occupied. After a sponsor change, a seizing surf industry, and a shifting business model for making surf films, Sterling found himself burned out and uninspired. He moved back to Pensacola, and after I hadn't seen much from him for a year or two, that's when I was headed to Florida and when I reached out to him and when we failed to connect. He's gone even more dormant in the 3 years since, never publishing to Pinch My Salt, only producing an occasional short film, but the comedy has almost been entirely replaced with him simply surfing the Gulf Coast on an array of Christensen alternative shortboards. And then earlier this month, the Surfer's Journal landed in my mailbox, an actual physical copy of the magazine. And as I thumbed through it, I came across an article about Spencer that offered a portrait of a depression and an angst that was underlying all of those years of comedy. So I mentioned this article to Scott Bass on Spit, and it sparked a heated debate, with Scott even questioning Sterling's intentions. So I reached out to Sterling again after 3 years of no emails, and found that he's still living in Pensacola, and we were able to record this conversation via Zoom from my home in California. And I'm used to seeing Sterling Spencer on my computer, but the Sterling that I connected with on Zoom was a very different version. Low energy, calm, sensitive, introspective, and really full of insights. So, without further ado, my name is David Scales, and I hope that you enjoy my conversation with the self-proclaimed #1 surfer in the world, Sterling Spencer.
Kind of what feels right for like my soul, rather than I kind of let go career or let go of any type of pressures in that area. I'm like being guided by, like my soul. So I feel like life, I moved back home. It's been about 5 years, and like life has felt more crazy. Like I ignored stuff for so long. I feel like for 5 years, I've been just like going through emotional, mental, spiritual, just like I've been going through it all for years, it feels like. And like, so now that I've kind of figuring out who I am. And so it's like, I've been on like a spiritual journey doing nothing.
When you said you were ignoring things previously, what type of things were you ignoring?
Mostly the grief of my father and grandmother and a few friends passing. It took me, I ignored it heavily. And so my dad passed away 10 years ago now. So I ignored it for so long. It created all sorts of just emotional damage in me, which ended up burning myself out as far as career wise, because I couldn't focus anymore. Like physically, I was getting sick from emotional distress. It felt like I've just been kind of slowly. I feel like just now I'm figuring out how to be an adult. So it's like many years of just kind of bouncing around within myself, it feels like.
I want to talk about the grief, and I ask you these things because listeners have experienced the exact same thing, and if they haven't yet, they will. The loss of a parent, you talking about the grief and how it affected you. Clearly, the death of a loved one will affect anybody, but was there unresolved issues? Was there ways that you had wished you had managed your relationship differently with your father? What do you think was the source of the grief?
Yeah, it was like he died when I was 22, and my career just took like a major shift. I went from like 20 years of, with my dad, and he wanted me to be a world champ. And within like 6 months, I made this like crazy shift where all of a sudden, like, I had a big following on the internet, and the internet was brand new. He didn't even like know what the internet was. And I just started like I basically became my own production company, and like, he didn't understand any of it. No one, it felt like no one did, but, so it was like such a huge shift, and it was like really successful shift, like immediately, like Billabong supported it, and just like I started having like a lot of money to make my own movies, and like, but he died like right when that happened. So for like a full year, he was very not upset, but he was bummed out because like he felt like his whole life, or like my whole life, was working towards being a world champ. And I just like shifted it within like 6 months.
Right.
So like, of course he would have eventually come to terms with that, and we would have like naturally made up, or not made up, but just like figured it out, but we didn't get that. I was super confused because it was just like, because it feels like when your parent dies, you want to like avenge their death and make them proud or something. And I felt like I couldn't do it. Like, am I going to go back and do contests? Like something I don't love. It was just like super confusing time. So I was like really successful, but at the same time felt sad because like my whole career was, him and I were working together with it,
Do you know anything about his relationship with his father?
Yeah, he didn't have one. His father like was abusive. He never knew him. So yeah, he was learning how to be a dad too,
Totally. Kind of with 10 years of hindsight and processing, do you still feel the need to, prove yourself to him or to avenge his death, as you put it?
I don't know, not anymore.
Okay, good. Well, I mean, let's be honest. His expectations were unrealistic. Like for him to expect you to be a world champ is a minuscule, despite your talent, or no matter how talented you could be, that's a minuscule, possibility. So that kind of represents a lack of realistic perception on his part, and what you were doing was amazing. And if he didn't recognize that in the short amount of time that he got to witness it, he would have with due time. Turns out the internet was here to stay, and you were early to the brand of comedy that you were providing, and it was genius, So I think he would have been proud for sure.
Yeah, it took me a while to process all this, like seeing just you just it feels like we all want to just blame our parents rather than realize they're humans too and they're on their stage of learning. We're just like, oh, they didn't do that, so they're bad.
Totally.
Now that I'm a father, it's like, oh wow, gosh. I understand my dad completely. Like every year my son gets older, I'm like, God, no wonder my dad was acting this way.
And how old was he when he had you?
Well, he died when he was 60. And I was 22. So
Okay. So
he,
because I always put that into perspective. Like my parents were married, had 2 kids, and divorced by the age of 27. And to try to put that into perspective now, it's like mind blowing, Tell me about the grief though. Was there something that happened that kind of sparked that change?
I was getting very depressed to where I wasn't enjoying what I was doing anymore. And like I wasn't enjoying surfing. I wasn't enjoying anything, it felt like. So I just finally got to a point where I was like, I just got the 2 new managers, and I was gonna make I was like, oh, I want to be like the Rob Dyrdek of surfing, and I got these big managers, and it was all like happening, but I was just like, I might kill myself if I do this. Like I was that depressed, and it was just like kind of a fork in the road. Like, do I keep taking like drugs to cope, or do I like go just like get away? That's what it felt like. Like I could keep taking Xanax or keep drinking or keep whatever, and it was just like I want to know life rather than like be more rich and famous.
Yeah.
So it was like a major fork in the road, and I took life.
Do you think that there was any way for you to actually manage both those things, to be able to manage the career path that you were on and quell the depression?
Yeah, if I now like a team of people I work with, like I have a therapist, I have a doctor that I trust holistically, I have friends that know I'm an emotional person, but back then I knew nothing really. So it was just like, in hindsight, if I would have like had kind of a team, probably could have balanced both. But my nature is to procrastinate and to ignore and to just want things to be good.
Yeah.
And that's not the best way to go through life. Like it's good to deal with stuff when it happens and then enjoy.
Right. Did you have a conversation with your management team about what you were experiencing?
Yeah. But it just felt like they weren't going to wait.
Yeah.
It was going to take some time. Like, it was going to take, I feel like if you're in that place, you need about a year to kind of get yourself, moving again.
Yeah.
Like not being on drugs, not, like really being in a good place. And they're like, okay, you got 3 months, report back to us. If not, your contract is voided. Like, or just like, so that was just like even more pressure.
And it's also a real lack of support. I feel like when you're going through a vulnerable time like that, support is what you need. And to have the people who you're relying on, but are also the ones ushering you into this new way of life that doesn't bode well for trusting them in that new way of life, you know?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. Like, it all happened kind of at the same time. Like, I feel like if I would have had the long relationships, and I just switched to Rusty, which my manager bought Rusty. So that was like why I went to Rusty. And so like, I feel like Billabong would have worked with me because I was with them. I was one of their longest team riders. So I feel like they would have worked with me because they saw what I, you know, like me healthy, you know.
Totally.
But with this new company and my manager owning it, it was like, all right, you got to get going. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know, so it was just bad timing. And I feel like when my manager bought that company, he realized like what a mistake it was.
Yeah.
So he's got stress, you know. So it was just like, I don't blame like bad support. I just feel like it was all bad timing.
Yeah. Let's go back to Pinch My Salt. How much of the creative energy for Pinch My Salt was coming from the exact substances that were also, you know, fueling your depression?
Yeah, like I'm the most creative when I'm in crisis.
Mm.
So I that, and I hated it, but also it was like the fuel. So it was such a curse, but blessing. It's like such yin and yang, you know, like being a comedian takes a lot of balancing within yourself because a normal human brain just kind of cruises.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to tap into a place constantly, you kind of have to. It's kind of an extreme lifestyle in your brain, and I didn't know that stuff. You know, I'm just kind of ping ponging along.
Right. It's interesting, though, you defining that the creativity comes from chaos rather than coming from the substances themselves, because I feel like you could, in this new iteration of your life, create a version of chaos that fuels the creativity that isn't harmful, you know?
Right. Totally. Yeah. When my life is in balance, I for sure foreseeing, you know, like a healthy, balanced career lifestyle. But
Yeah.
honestly, I keep feeling close to it, and then life throws me for a loop. Like just in the past year, I got hit in the head, and I started getting like crazy concussion stuff for the past 6 months. Like my nervous system got messed up, like my back got messed up just from getting hit in the head. So it's just like COVID hit, like like so much stuff happened at once, and I was like the past 6 months have been like even gnarlier in a totally different way.
For sure.
Like physically, I've never dealt with physical illness like I have in the past 6 months. So that's thrown me for a loop. Like
what was the head injury?
I was surfing and my fin hit me in my head.
Wow.
And it cut me really bad. And I just, I saw a doctor and they're like, "Oh, you're all right." And I just had kind of like a mellow concussion, but it was winter and I kept surfing in cold water. And I kind of like was into like extreme breathing and stuff, and it wasn't good for that. So I just started getting sick and I didn't know why. So it was just like for months, right when COVID hit, I felt like I was dying and I didn't know why. So I like was going to doctors and just like my depression it was a new level of depression, like completely different from like emotional depression. It's like physical depression. I was like, what is this? I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, what is this now? You know, like I'm just coming out of that. So life has been my teacher.
Sure.
Like I've been
What
going.
what happened on that wave?
It was freak accident. I pulled into a tube, and it was super shallow. And the offshore wind like picked my board up and flew it in the air forever, and I didn't know. And I was just like walking, and it just like nailed me. And it was just like ever since then, I wasn't the same.
So wait a second. You pulled into a tube, ate it, and the wind caught your board and just took off with it. And you got up out of the water and were walking, and then it landed and hit you.
So for like 10 seconds, the board was in the air. So
That's insane.
it was a complete freak accident. It was like a knee-high wave too.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's the definition of a freak accident. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, like for everything I've been through in the ocean, that was like
Wild. Back to Pinch My Salt. Was the Jeremy video the genesis?
it was because even though I was at it for a while, I was still like underground. And then when Jeremy happened, it was like there was nothing to talk about in surfing. So people just talked about it. It felt like for a whole year. Like I remember Stab magazine kept doing check-ins. Like, like has Jeremy found Sterling yet? Like, like they kind of like helped. And that when that whole thing happened, because it was so silly. Looking back now, like if I did it now, no one would think twice. Because the internet just makes fun of people now, and it's just accepted.
Yeah.
But it was like the internet was so new, and surfing was so like core still, like pro surf coreness. So when I did that, it was like, ooh, ouch, Sterling's throwing blows at people, and I'm still on the QS.
Right.
So guys are thinking I'm just like this. I'm like cheap shotting them, so it created such buzz and such drama. Like every contest I would go to, I'm like, oh my gosh, like who's going to try to fight me?
Were you surprised that Jeremy was so upset?
I was completely surprised because I didn't understand the power of the internet yet either. Because like my partner at the time that I worked with, David Malcolm, he worked at Billabong, and I lived at his house. We lived in this little studio, and he had like a big bed, and I like slept under the bed. He's like a 7-foot human, so like his feet would hang off, and I would like wake up like them tickling me in my face. But he like, it was just random. He's like, dude, you should voice over this. I was like, all right, let's do it. And did it first try, and like posted it and fell asleep, like high-fived and fell asleep, and like woke up to his feet, and he's like, gets on the computer. He's like, Sterling, the video has 60,000 views. And I'm like, what? And I go look at my Facebook, and Jeremy Flores is the first message.
Oh my gosh.
And he's just like livid, just like pissed off. And that's when we were just like, what is this world? What is the internet? Like we just reached 60,000 humans overnight. Like that was just like hard to comprehend. Like I didn't have a cell phone then. Like, it was really new. Yeah, that's where it all started pretty much.
How did Jeremy's anger fit into your perspective? Did you care at all?
I thought he was overreacting for sure.
Yeah.
Which fueled me being more cheeky. You know,
Good.
my my ego is like, like, come on, dude. But yeah, looking back, I realized no one understood it.
See, I disagree. You said that earlier, that when you were talking about your father, he didn't understand it. You felt like nobody understood it, except 60,000 people understood it. Like all of us watching on the internet completely got it. I never once thought that Jeremy hated children. I
Right.
never thought that that was Jeremy's voice. I thought it was hilarious, and it was like a victimless crime. It was kind of the ultimate comedy because it's satire that is poking fun at how serious we all take surfing. There's no victim here. It was shocking to me that Jeremy can't laugh at it. And it actually made me dislike Jeremy. I had no reason. I was indifferent to Jeremy before. Maybe I admired his surfing at certain times. But as soon as he overreacted to that, I was like, God, that guy's such a wuss. Like, what? He can't take a joke? So I want you to know everybody got it. We were there rooting for you, going, dude, go on, keep going.
Well, it's a little different in my shoes because I'm like around these people. And like, Hawaii was still the wild, wild west. So Jeremy's tight with all the Hawaiians, and so was I, but not like Jeremy, like Jeremy was a pipe master. And so it just, yeah, it's hilarious, dude. It became this just crazy drama. And like Kelly was a lot of drama too, because that was during when Andy Irons was winning world titles. So it was like me making fun of Kelly. Andy and Taj and Joel, they're like egging me on. They're like, yeah, come on. Like, it's working.
And you guys are all on Billabong, right?
Yeah, I would be with them for months in Hawaii every year, So it was like, it was just kind of this like, it was like I was like the only person with an Instagram.
Right.
I had somehow this voice that the whole surf world could see and hear, but no one else had it. So all of a sudden it was like, like Andy's like, oh, put this up. He's like, so I'm like battling Kelly on the internet for Andy.
Right.
Team Billabong versus Quicksilver. That's the way it felt, like.
What was the Kelly incident?
There wasn't necessarily incident, but, like when on my blog, I would just post Photoshop pictures of my head over Kelly or with Kelly. And instantly, the vibe was like, you can't, that's Kelly. Like, you can't do that. It was like, this is Kelly. And it felt so bad and so good. It was like, you shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it. And so like, so I would just like constantly, Kelly was like my mascot. And I realized Kelly being my mascot made people think of me when they thought Kelly. So it was like it became like this marketing campaign for myself. Like, I'm like family friends with Kelly and all his brothers. Like, we're actually super tight, our families. So it was just like, I know he knew I was joking, but when people chime in, like haters of Kelly, like I'm like their hero. But I'm not coming at Kelly in a negative sense. But those people are. Everyone's looking to hate on Kelly because he's so successful. So it was like I became kind of to Kelly's mind, like Sterling doesn't like me or whatever, So, eventually, he was always curious, like, what is Sterling? Like, he never, I was like Kelly's kryptonite because he couldn't beat me in a contest. And if he publicly said anything about me, it just raised my
Totally.
So I was just like this weird, person he just tried to ignore, kind of.
What did he ever express to you? Did you guys ever have a conversation?
We only got into it once. And I accidentally showed his phone number on this fake web, or during the Pipeline Masters one year, I filmed another computer and then voiced over it on my website. And I showed my phone to people. I'm like, I'm calling Kelly, just like for 1 second. And then like 300 kids screenshotted it and called him. So he's like in the Pipe Masters and getting 300 calls. And he's just like, Sterling. And it was totally by accident. And but he called me and he was pissed. I was like, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that it was a victimless humor, but that is a misstep on your part. That one you deserve to apologize for.
No, totally. Like, and then I saw him at Channel Islands Factory, and he was just like, "What's up, guy?" And apparently, I was in the water. We were surfing earlier, and I didn't know it was him. I wear glasses, and I couldn't see. And he like waved at me, and I just like blew him off. I like looked at him, and he like waved at me, and I just like looked off. And he's probably just like, "Who is this?"
Totally. You know what's funny? I mean, maybe I'm saying this because I'm looking at it through our current internet perspective. I'm shocked that Kelly wouldn't realize that everything you're doing is elevating his profile. And the same thing with Jeremy Flores. Like, I guarantee you more people watched your video on Jeremy Flores than have ever watched any one of his heats.
I felt like it made Jeremy Flores like a famous pro surfer after that. Like that.
100% it did.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, but me and Jeremy, we did get to a good place eventually.
Well, tell me before that good place, tell me how the confrontation went down when he ultimately connected with you.
For 2 years, it was Jeremy's looking for you. Jeremy's looking for you. Everywhere I go, Jeremy's looking for you. And we were in New York. My hair grew out, started wearing glasses. So he like didn't recognize me. And we were like standing in line together, and I was like, oh. He had no idea it was me. And it was just like, that's when I realized, oh, this is real. He really is looking for me. And he's like a jiu-jitsu master, and he's looking to practice.
Yeah.
So then I go on a random trip to Panama, and we're booked in the same hotel. And Billabong has like one side of the hotel, and Quicksilver had the other. And we'd all eat breakfast at the same spot, and I'd sit on the other side of the room just like, and he'd just stare at me like, and it was like all the French guys of Quicksilver, and they would just like give me this look like every morning. And we'd go surf the same place. No one would talk to each other. I was with like a bunch of young guys. I was with like Griffin, Colapinto. I was with like a bunch of like the new school Billabong kids. So I don't know why he didn't beat me up there, because that would have been the perfect spot.
Yeah.
And then that later in Hawaii, I was coming out with my movie Surf Madness, and it had a lot of hype because I had Verizon behind it, and they were just like pumping it on every webcast, like Sterling's new movie's coming, like, so it had a bunch of hype. And a lot of the commercials was Jeremy Flores video, teasers, Jeremy Flores, and then like Adriano, like making fun of pro surfers, you know? So it was just like, everyone was just like waiting to see this movie, like, oh my gosh, like what is going to happen? So I feel like that built up in Jeremy, and he was like expecting like, you know, Sterling is going to make fun of me again. So I just got to Hawaii. I just flew in, and it was the night of the Surfer Pole Awards. I get to the Surfer Pole Awards. I'm like drinking a drink. I'm like in Hawaii. I'm like, yeah. And all of a sudden I feel this like arm come around my neck. And then all of a sudden I wake up, and I'm just like dangling and Jeremy is holding me, and there's like 50 people circled around us, and Jeremy's like talking to the crowd. He's like, Sterling and I are best friends. Look, and he kisses me on my mouth. And he's like, look, and he like kisses me, and I'm like, I'm seeing stars. I'm like, where am I? And everyone's like, and then like he chokes me again, and everyone like sits up, and then he like lets it go, and he's like, I'm just kidding. And he just got in big trouble with Sonny Garcia for fighting that kid, and so I feel like it clicked in his head, like, oh no, like I can't kill Sterling here. Because I'm like this silly human. He like finally saw me, and he's like, this is Sterling? This is it?
Yeah.
I'm like in an Aloha shirt, just like, I just cut myself bangs. I've got super long curly hair. Like I just looked like an idiot, you know? And he's like, so then he like whispers, I like lay on the ground. He like whispers in my ear. He's like, tomorrow night at your premiere, you will learn the ultimate. And so all night I can't sleep. I'm like, all the Hawaiians are just kind of giving me this look like can't wait to give you lickings. I'm just like, oh no. So like Billabong has this big party at the house with like Taj, and I'm just like scared. I'm like, what's gonna happen? So we like all drive to Turtle Bay Resort, and like we start the movie, and like I look in the back, and Jeremy and like all these Hawaiians are at every door, like lined up. I'm like, I look at Dave, I'm like, it was nice knowing you, man. And in the movie, Jeremy wasn't in the movie. In the movie, I feel like they enjoyed it.
Okay.
And they were expecting like this, you know, bashing of pro surfers or whatever. And they realized it was just fun. So when the like lights went off, they're just like, he's okay.
Maybe they finally got the sense of humor.
Yeah, maybe because they sat down and watched it, and we just like talked it all out that night.
Wow.
He's just like that, you know, that video gave me so much shit and in France, and it hurt my profile and yada yada yada. And I was like, well, I was definitely not trying to do that, you know, like it was really just by accident. And I feel like Stab Magazine just fueled the fire, and it was just like, and so we just talked it out. And this guy Flinto, who used to run Billabong Australia, he like sat Jeremy down, was like, look, everyone loves you. It's not a big deal. Like, and I remember it was just like over after that. Like,
good.
He bought me like a drink, and I never dealt with that again.
I guess I'm just shocked again at his lack of self-awareness that any hurting of his profile had to do with him choking people out. It had nothing to do with you, you know, like it's,
right.
And you're, like we already discussed, what you did only elevated people's awareness of Jeremy. Right. And then if he chokes people out with all that awareness, that's on him, you know?
I'm sure he was in a learning stage too, you know? Like,
totally.
We both, and we were like the yin and yang of the industry, and it was just happening. We were just like fighting.
On a bigger picture, it had importance to surfing because all of the legacy surf media companies only ever wrote glorified press releases for surfers. There was never a critical word written. And Lewis Samuels doing the power ranking stuff, and even prior to him, Derek Hind doing it, it was critical. Right. And it wasn't making fun for the sake of making fun, but it was critical. And we had never seen people be critical about these professional surfers that we all venerate. And so yours was a step beyond that, where it wasn't necessarily critical, but it was at least lighthearted and almost making fun of the seriousness of surfing. And it was so needed, you know?
Yeah, totally. And that's the way I felt. Like I surfed in one WCT, which is WSL now. I qualified. And that one event, I was there for like 3 weeks, the J-Bay contest. And I got such a heavy dose on how serious everyone is taking themselves. I feel like that's when whoever I am and the way my brain works and my soul works, I instantly saw that. And I'm like, I can't do this. And I was like 19 then. And I was like, this is like, I'm with my heroes, you know, like I was with like Corey Lopez and Andy and, you know, CJ and all the Florida guys on tour, you know, and stuff. But I was just like, man, I am just not cut out for this. Like, all they do is talk about the contest and talk about the heat and talk about this guy. Like, that's all, like, their whole life consumes. Like, it's so crazy. Like, those guys are just completely different creatures, you know, like real pro athletes. And I always felt like I'm like a pro athlete, and like I have like a nerd brain and a pro athlete body. That's what it always felt like. So I was just like kind of this, I always felt I was just like experience this for, you know, a reason or whatever, you know, like, so that contest was for sure the direction change within my mind. And the internet, it was I know it was like one of the first contests like Surfline put on the internet. And I was learning the power of the internet too there. Like I saw a Centaur when I was a kid, and I told the webcast that. And when I was there, all of a sudden my nickname was Centaur, and like it was like Centaur versus, because I had a heat against Kelly. So it was like Centaur versus Kelly, like, and I was totally real. I'm like, dude, the internet is it. Like, if you want to get famous, just start making shit up.
Yeah.
That's when all the bulbs started clicking. Like, ding, ding, ding.
Well, you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, my millennial brain could naturally flow that way. You know, all the older guys, their brains were completely different.
Mm-hmm.
I was the natural wave that was coming through, you know?
Yeah. You said you saw a Centaur when you were a kid. Tell me, where'd you see it?
Dude, it was like such a pivotal moment in my life that I like talked to my therapist.
Dying to know.
When I was 5, I grew up in like the woods, and one night, literally, this dude walked up to the door, and he was super creepy and weird. And I was just like, stranger. So I started like screaming, and my brother was babysitting me. And when the guy turned around, it was just this giant horse butt, and it just took off like. I was like, what? And like all I talked about was this monster. I kept saying like, I saw a monster for like a year. My parents were just like, oh, he's just being a kid, you know? And I swear I would think about it a handful of times every year. Like, what was that? What was that? What was that? So at that J-Bay contest, everyone would eat at the same place. And I ended up telling like everyone the story in front of everyone. And they're just like, Centaur! Everyone's like drunk. Everyone's like drunk, and they're like, Centaur, Centaur. I'm like, what's a Centaur? And they're like, half man, half horse. I was like, Centaur! I was like up on the table. They're like carrying me like, Centaur, Centaur.
So you didn't know that there was a mythology?
I never Centaur.
Huh. So in hindsight, what do you think that was in your childhood?
Maybe just like I feel like it was like maybe the imagination realm that we dip into like at night, like happening during the waking state. Like, you know, when you're a kid, just like your brain is so lucid. I feel like something like that was happening.
Is there a possibility that that crazy dude hopped on a horse and rode away?
No, I can see it right now in my brain. It was it was both.
Crazy. In regard to this kind of new phase of life since you've been back in Pensacola, I know you said grief kind of brought you there, but what have you done? You talked about therapy.
I really, in the past 5 years, got into meditation.
Mm.
And that was like a huge turning point for myself and my life. Being able to kind of understand my brain. Just like sitting back and like, what is all this? What is life? You know? So for like a year, I just kind of like walked in the woods and meditated, and I felt like I was being born again. Just like, wow, I've never really looked at this stuff.
What
I've been on this rat race.
What does meditation look like for you?
Just now, like using tools to completely be immersed in the moment. And I never even knew that the moment is now. I felt like I was just kind of this programmed creature. And then when I started meditating, it's like, oh, I'm like life. I'm like this piece of life. And so it was just like kind of this awakening of, it's just nice breathing.
So walk me through a practice.
Well, before my injury, it's been hard to meditate since I've been injured. But I had I created this like routine for myself where I'd wake up in the morning, I would do like Wim Hof breathing or something. And then I would just go take long walks in the park and just really connect like with my breathing and feeling my feet on the ground and just trying to be in like a very grateful state. And by the time I get home, I'm like, wow, I love life.
Are you shoeless, barefoot?
Oh, yeah.
And do you do this prior to eating, or is there any fuel in your system?
I would do it before I ate and stuff. I got into intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Where I'd like 2 meals a day, and I noticed amazing results from that. I can't do it right now because of my concussion. I have to like eat a lot of fat for healing. I also got into veganism, which I regret now.
Why?
But at the time I was vegan, and I think it had its purpose, but not long term.
So you don't recommend it for listeners?
I know this is such a like debate. I think every human is different, and some humans it could be an awesome thing, but long term, from what I've seen and people I know, it's always been a bad thing. Like I've yet to see like a long term vegan that wasn't like an Asian person that grew up eating rice. like I think a lot of it depends on your background and your ancestors and the way your stomach has been formed over thousands of years. Like it's like for a year it feels good, and then all of a sudden I started getting sick in weird places, and then I hear other people telling me the same thing. And like my therapist, he was a vegan for 20 years and he ended up in critical condition because of it.
Wow.
And so now he's on the carnivore diet, and he's a yogi, he's a meditation master, and he only eats meat now.
Crazy.
And so like that whole experience really, you don't really know anything and don't say you know anything, because life will always kick you in the ass.
Yeah.
So now, now I like have to eat meat right now, or like if I tried to be vegan right now, I would get sick. The way my brain needs fat, it needs animal fat right now. Like I feel it when I eat it. It's like, oh, whew. Like it's pretty crazy.
Sounds like, I mean, you mentioned balance earlier, but also it seems like with a lot of the work that you've done, what you've learned to do is just attune to what your body is telling you and be able to read those signs. Because I feel like a lot of people have so many layers of stuff built up. They don't even know. They'll eat fast food for a year and not even feel the effects of it because
Crazy stomach.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
But it's ruining them, without them
Right.
knowing.
Balance is always the key.
Back to your morning ritual of the meditation. You're walking around in the morning. Are you stressed about emails that you got to return when you get back to the house? Like, what do you do for work?
Well, the way like my contract had ended, I still had like a bunch of money that I got. And then my family, I have surf shops here, had a few years to kind of just cruise, before I needed to get more involved with Interlight Surf Shop and stuff like that, So for like 2 years, I sold some properties and I had my son. I got married.
How did you meet Amanda, and where were you at in your kind of personal growth process at the time?
We met right when I was getting dropped from Rusty. She's like this beautiful creature, and I just kind of just got lost in life with her for a while. Like I was just like, whatever. And we just like fell in love, and she got pregnant instantly from nature taking over. So that was like pretty crazy. I'm like, oh my God, like now I'm going to have a son. Like,
how old were you?
29.
What's her story? Like, what's her short backstory, and what were her expectations of you in that moment?
She was just kind of cruising, living life too. She's kind of in an in-between process too. And she's from like the country. She's like a country girl. And so, I was like I was still kind of like a famous pro surfer at the time. So, and then, I started going through, like, lost my sponsorship, and she was just like, so, supportive. She's like, who cares? Like, if she always said, like, we could be selling peanuts on the side of the road together and be happy, So that, having that feeling really made me feel okay. It was like, like someone really loves me and accepts me, not like, oh, you need to maintain this pro surfer lifestyle for me to love you.
Right.
So that was huge.
How much of your kind of the depression that you've explained and the grief that you were experiencing, how much of that did she understand, and was she able to cope and handle and support through that?
She didn't understand it, and it definitely hurt our marriage. And like I brought this like huge bag of baggage and it was super hard in our relationship, and I feel like we're just kind of getting to a place where we understand each other, because she's never experienced depression. She's never had mental health issues, but she has a huge heart, and I think she was drawn to me to like help heal me. And it was really good at first, but as as we had a child, I was like, okay, I have to like grow up, or I'm going to drown this person,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to self. So when my son was born, that's when I really got into meditation. It was like, okay, I need tools. And I had like a very profound first meditation experience, like so crazy, so like so much relief, so like it was so intense and crazy. It was like, wow, like, whoa, what is this world? I was such a bummer for a while, and then when I started meditating, I became so good. It made me feel, then I was on the opposite side of the spectrum, and it made her feel left behind. Like, wait a second, I thought,
right.
So it was like us being married has been like, us learning how to ride this wave together, like from completely two sides of, the spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, all relationships I think are and go through learning curves like that, but some are more intense than others,
Luckily I'm funny, or she would have left. It's like my humor has like helped me get through life. Like, I feel like depression, it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
It's either grief or emotional stuff from childhood you haven't looked in the mirror yet,
Yeah.
or something physical, like your stomach is messed up. Like I've seen so many people just fix their diet and they're like, oh, I feel fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I feel like there's many types of depression. Depression is just a word we give it, you know, like I think it's just being a human, you know, like leveling your brain out and figuring out your rhythm.
Right. I'm certainly no expert, and I'm not the healthiest person in the world either, but it is crazy friends who live in Orange County who have these kind of chronic issues, and they have terrible diets, they drink a ton of alcohol, they have terrible sleep patterns, they're working excessively, and then they have some sort of ailment, and their first way of dealing with it is medicating.
Yeah, I feel like modern medicine is amazing, but it's good as a crutch to get you to a healthy place.
Right.
Not that's not the healthy place.
Kind of in closing, we started out talking about whether or not there's a place in the surf content game for you at this point, and you talked about maybe making a film. If you could figure out the business model for that, how would that film be different than the previous films, or how would it be similar?
I feel like it'd be maybe less me. As I've gotten older, like I feel like the magic to life is people. It'd be more of making films for the experience rather than the end product. I feel like that's what I've learned with life is like the only thing that matters is your experience. That's the only thing that's like really happening. So like enjoy it, do what you want and enjoy it rather than do something for an end product. Because I felt like I lived my life for the end product. Like, oh, you know, like I'm unhappy and this sucks right now, but I'm going to do it. And then that's going to like make my status bigger. You know, it's always this imaginary world my life was in. So now like I would love to just like experience.
Sounds like maybe a feature film isn't the best medium for that, because just the nature of that is to put a bunch of effort and then there's an end. Like social media and YouTube is kind of maybe the more fluid platform.
Yeah. If I'm like balanced, because I when I started a YouTube channel, it was I like knew YouTube was next, but it totally had no soul. And I was working for a company that was paying me, and it was just like it totally sucked the fun out of it, even though I was making more money. So like if you cannot get sucked into the rat race, like if you can just document and put it up and not care about it kind of thing, once you start messing with that stuff, I swear it's just so addicting. It's all this weird addicting world. I'm trying to stay away from that.
The reality is all of these things can tremendously help make your life more efficient and access your audience, but they can also devour you. So you really have to just kind of use it on your own terms and then clock out.
Totally. Yeah, there's that's what I never could balance.
Yeah.
Like,
tell me about how often do you surf nowadays? And I mean, first of all, I never thought of Pensacola for surf, or Alabama for that matter, but the imagery that you post from there makes it look like the waves are pumping all the time. So what are the waves actually like, and how often are you actually surfing?
I feel like I didn't even knew how good the waves are here till I moved home full time. Wherever we are on the bottom of the Gulf, we have the DeSoto Canyon. So it's like super deep. So it's kind of like Hatters, the way it breaks. So it's just like, it's not like Cocoa Beach where it's like 3 miles out to sea, it's breaking, you know, it's like dumpy. And during the winter, I'm surfing almost every day. There's a lot of weather with it. So it's like, it's not like it's cold. It gets really cold here. Like it gets down in the 30s during the winter. So it's like, I love the winters here. They're beautiful. No one's around. The surf's up all the time. I just kind of get lost in my own little world. Like the beaches where I live are national parks. So you just drive in. It's just beautiful, you know, woodlands. So it's super beautiful here. It's starting to get crowded.
Sure.
Not surf wise, but the city's starting to take off. So
Yeah.
people are realizing.
We started out the conversation with you saying that you've been working with Chris Christensen for, is it 6 years now?
8.
8 years. Considering that there's a like really strong board building community in Florida and that you guys have surf shops, what's behind that decision? Why not work with a local shaper? And
Well, I met Chris when I was living in California, and Chris like saved my surfing soul. We have a deep bond. I was living with Rob, and Rob really steered my surfing soul. You know, like I started longboarding again. I grew up longboarding. I started longboarding again, started riding like the 12-footer skip fries. And my dad made a film of skip fry called Some Like It Smooth. And they only rode like 12-foot boards or bigger. So for me, like when I was in San Diego, I totally dipped back into my surfing soul, my roots, you know, like growing up surfing with Skip Fry and Hank Warner. Hank Warner is like my godfather. So like when I was living with Machado, he like dipped me back in, and then I met Chris, and I was riding Firewire surfboards, which is like the total opposite. So like Chris, like when I started riding for him, I was riding like pro shapes. Like we were working on like, you know, normal shortboards, but he would just give me a fish. He would give me an Ocean Racer, you know, Mini Simmons. And I started riding that stuff and I was like, whoa, what's this world? You know, like I haven't ridden this stuff since I was a kid. And it just brought back all these amazing connections. And then I only rode like his fish for like a whole year.
wow.
It like seriously saved my surfing soul. Like just connecting back to the ocean, and it's more about the energy and feeling rather than like the clip you're getting.
Right.
And I got better at surfing. Like I like missed all this fundamental connections with the ocean, like being on a shortboard. And I grew up a 90s kid. So like Taylor Steele, that whole punk revolution. So I just wanted to shred, do 360s. And so I missed that like pivotal, like, you know, you need to learn how to bottom turn, I feel like I could do it, but I didn't know why I was doing it. And so like for a whole year, I was just riding my fish, just like learning it all over again and loving it. It's like my whole life I played like lead guitar, and then I like switched to jazz and realized, oh man, this is good. You know, like it's about the music, it's about the surfing, not about you, you know. That's so Chris and his boards was huge for my development.
I feel like, wasn't he out there building boards maybe at Ricky's a month ago or something?
Yeah, it's funny. Ricky Carroll was my shaper growing up. And now Chris is he goes to Florida and shapes like 90 boards a couple times a year now. I guess because of COVID.
Yeah.
Because so many people want boards now. Like our shops are selling boards like crazy because there's nothing to do but surf.
Right. Yeah, no, COVID's been really good for the surf business.
Oh, it's been amazing for our shops. Like
Good.
People come to the shop now.
Good. What was the last surfboard that you rode?
Since my concussion, I haven't surfed since April.
Is that the longest run that you've ever gone without surfing?
Yeah. I body surf every day, so that keeps me sane.
Good.
But last board, Chris just shaped me a lane splitter.
Don't know it.
and it's like a high performance twin fin pintail, and it's got like a wing, and it's insane. Like, it's like the way I want a shortboard. I can still have that free flow glide, but like still carve super hard.
Did you post a photo of that board?
I've got video of it.
I feel like I saw something about it.
Yeah, I surfed this big swell we had in Alabama where it's like, I mean, big for Alabama, but it's like full tubing.
Yeah.
And the board's like a 5.2, and I was riding like 6 foot waves.
Wow.
And it just like so good.
By the way, what's the surf community like in Alabama? Does it get crowded?
Yeah, Alabama, the coastline's pretty small. Like, it's pretty tight. It's not long like Florida. So there's kind of only like 2 spots. Like, there's the pier and Alabama Point. That's usually where everyone surfs. So those spots get crowded. It's actually, when I was younger, they were actually really aggro when I would come over there. They're like, "Oh, y'all Florida surfers don't come on here."
Really? Are they good?
Yeah. A few older gentlemen that I surf with all the time, and they surf great.
Wow. Good for them. Blowing up their secret.
I mean, where I live is literally like, I could see it across the water.
Okay.
If you didn't have to drive around, it would take like 10 minutes to get there.
Okay. Got it.
So it's not like this huge border long drive. It takes like 30 minutes to drive over there.
Gotcha. Well, I think whatever you do next in terms of film or social media or whatever, it has the potential of being a much better version, a much more nuanced and complex version than all of the pinch my salt stuff before, which I also loved, but you've just got a lot more complexity now. So I'm looking forward to whatever comes next.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. As soon as life quits kicking me around.
No rush. Enjoy the family in the meantime, and there'll be people waiting to see what comes next when you're ready.
That's awesome. I appreciate that.
No worries, man. Thanks for taking so much time too to chat.
Yeah, man. It's super good to talk to you. I know we've been talking about it for 3 years.